When a woman chooses someone else, it's easy to internalize that moment as rejection, as if it's a statement about your worth, your value, your masculinity. It can feel like everything you invested in, the love, the time, the dreams you quietly built, has suddenly slipped through your fingers. You might feel a punch in the chest, like the wind has been knocked out of you, and your instincts might tell you to chase, to explain, to fight for what you had. But here's the truth most men overlook. Her decision to leave isn't your defeat, it's your redirection. It's the universe stepping in and removing what no longer serves your path, even if you weren't ready to release it. Sometimes what feels like loss is actually protection in disguise. You don't always see it in the moment, but as time goes on, you begin to understand. She was never aligned with the man you are becoming. You were giving something deep, loyalty, patience, presence, and she turned away in search of something else, something more exciting or easier or louder. That isn't about you lacking anything. It's about her being unable to recognize or receive the depth you were offering. And in that moment, you're not being discarded. You're being freed. You're being pulled back to yourself, to your standards, to the identity you may have been watering down just to keep things together. You don't shrink to keep someone who no longer sees you. You don't beg to stay in a place where your soul is slowly dimming. You step back, not in bitterness, but in power. You observe instead of react. You remain grounded instead of unraveling. That stillness is what separates the Stoic man from the desperate boy. She made a choice, yes, but you own the response. And in that space between her leaving and your next move, you reclaim the one thing no one can take from you. Your ability to stay anchored in your truth, to hold the line of your own worth. Her leaving was not your end. It was your beginning, a clearing, a pause, a chance to realign your life with who you truly are without distraction or compromise. She didn't abandon you. She exited your path, and what feels like being left behind is actually being set free. Rejection is one of those experiences that can either destroy a man or define him. Most men see it as a dead end, as if her choosing someone else is undeniable proof that they weren't enough, that something was missing, that they were somehow inadequate. But that perception is deeply flawed. The truth is, rejection isn't a final verdict, it's a redirection. When someone walks away from you, especially someone you cared about deeply, the initial shock can cloud your perspective. But over time, with stillness and reflection, you begin to see the beauty in what was removed from your life. Her decision to choose another man over you isn't a reflection of your lack, but a mirror of her own needs, confusion, or inability to appreciate the kind of depth you brought. That rejection is not meant to destroy you. It's meant to strip away what no longer fits where you're going. The Stoics taught that life doesn't punish, it prepares, and that preparation often comes in the form of painful clarity. When she walks away, she's handing you an undeniable truth. She wasn't aligned with your path, with your vision, with the man you are becoming. That truth, while it stings, is actually a blessing because it saves you from overcommitting to someone who could not walk beside you at your level. If she didn't choose you, it doesn't mean you weren't valuable. It means she wasn't meant to carry the weight of what you bring. It means the space you once gave her is now available for something greater, something more deserving of your presence. Think of how many men stay trapped, investing more and more into someone who doesn't reciprocate, someone who gives less and less, while they abandon themselves piece by piece just to maintain the illusion of connection. That's not love, that's self-abandonment in disguise. Rejection rips that mask off and leaves you with what's real. It hurts, yes, but it also heals. It wakes you up. And once you wake up, Once you stop personalizing her choice as your failure, you begin to see the strength within that moment. It becomes a forge, a fire that, instead of burning you, tempers your character. It reveals what needs to change, what boundaries you must reinforce, what standards you've been compromising. It forces you to return to yourself and ask the harder questions. What kind of man am I becoming? What will I no longer tolerate? What version of myself have I hidden just to be accepted? And in that quiet reflection, you begin to rise, not with ego, not with revenge, but with a calm sense of power. You realize that her choosing someone else didn't make you any less. It simply cleared the path for someone or something that sees your value without needing to be convinced. Let that rejection refine your clarity. Let it sharpen your direction. Let it burn off the parts of you that were performing, pleasing, compromising, or doubting. Because what's left after the rejection, when you don't crumble, is a man who doesn't need to prove himself to be whole. A man who knows that rejection didn't break him. It revealed what no longer belonged in his life, and that revelation, if embraced with wisdom, becomes the very foundation upon which you build a stronger, more grounded self. When she saw a different future with someone else, it wasn't a betrayal of your worth. It was simply an alignment with her own path. And that's something every man must learn to accept without taking it as a personal failure. It's hard not to internalize it at first. You shared dreams, built plans, maybe even envisioned a life together down to the smallest details. Vacations, a home, children's names. You had mapped it all out in your heart. Then one day her energy begins to shift, subtly at first, fewer calls, less warmth. Then suddenly the conversation turns into a goodbye, and she tells you she sees something different for herself, maybe with someone new. And in that moment, the ground feels like it's cracking beneath your feet. You're staring at someone you thought you knew, wondering how long she had been drifting, how long you've been holding on to someone who had already emotionally stepped away. But here's the truth that separates a man grounded in wisdom from a man drowning in emotion. Just because she saw a different future doesn't mean you failed. People grow, people change. Sometimes they evolve in directions that no longer include you. And while that may hurt deeply, it doesn't make it wrong. What causes suffering is not always the event itself, but our resistance to accepting what is. You don't need to convince someone to keep you in their story. That's not love. That's control wrapped in fear. A Stoic man recognizes the shift. He sees the truth of the moment and respects it. Not because it's easy, but because self-respect always overrides emotional desperation. You don't cling to a vision that no longer reflects reality. You don't chase after someone who has already made peace with her decision. Instead, you step back with clarity, not with coldness, but with courage. That takes discipline. That takes inner stability. That takes a man who knows his value isn't tied to someone else's validation or choice. Think about it this way. When she imagined a future that didn't include you, it wasn't an attack on your value. It was simply a reflection of where her heart had gone, and that's something you cannot and should not try to control. The moment you begin trying to hold on to someone who's already gone in spirit, you begin shrinking. You begin softening your boundaries, diluting your essence, twisting yourself just to keep the illusion alive, and slowly you lose yourself. You become a man driven not by purpose, but by pursuit, not by clarity, but by confusion. And that's when things truly fall apart, not because she left, but because you abandoned yourself in the process of trying to make her stay. But there is another way. The Stoic path says, see the reality and let it guide you, not break you. If she sees a different life with someone else, you don't resist it. You accept it, not as defeat, but as direction. That's how you preserve your dignity. You let go without drama. You don't shout. You don't beg. You simply breathe. You say thank you for the honesty, even if it cut like a knife, and you walk away, not with rage, but with resolve. Because here's the hidden truth most people never see. When you release someone with grace, you protect your peace. You create space not only for your healing, but for your evolution. And in that space, something incredible starts to happen. You begin to remember who you were before you started making her the center of everything. You return to the man you were before you prioritized her vision over your own. You reconnect with your ambition, your focus, your silence, your standards. You no longer shape your future based on who stays. You shape it based on who you are. That shift, though quiet, is massive. It's when you go from being an option in someone else's story to being the author of your own. The man who accepts her choice without bitterness stands taller than the man who wins her back through pleading. Why? Because he refuses to live in a fantasy. He chooses reality, and in choosing reality, he chooses himself. That's when growth begins. She may one day look back. She may replay the moments in her mind, revisit the decision, wonder if she made the right choice. She might see your life from afar, how you carried yourself through it all, how you didn't crumble, how you didn't shrink. But by then, you'll be so far ahead in your own journey, so deeply rooted in who you've become, that her validation won't matter anymore. And not because you don't care, but because you've evolved into a man who no longer needs to be seen to know his worth. Her choice gave you that gift, not by staying, but by leaving, and that's something most men never realize until much later. When she chose a different future, she wasn't rejecting you. She was revealing what was no longer aligned, and alignment always leads to truth. You don't resist it. You respect it. You let it guide you into a future that matches your depth, your integrity, and your quiet strength. Emotion is not weakness. It's not something to be ashamed of, nor something that strips a man of his power. The modern interpretation of masculinity often suggests that to feel deeply is to fall apart, that shedding a tear or being affected by heartbreak somehow makes a man less capable or less grounded. But that's not Stoicism. That's suppression. There's a critical difference between feeling your pain and being controlled by it. Stoicism doesn't teach you to numb your heart. It teaches you to master it, to guide it, to hold space for your emotion without drowning in it. When she walks away, when she chooses someone else, when the future you imagined suddenly disappears, of course you'll feel something. That's normal, that's human. That emotional reaction is not a sign of weakness. It's a signal that you cared, that you invested, that you were present. You might find yourself lying awake at night, replaying the last conversation, wondering if there was something more you could have done, if there was a missed moment, if maybe you weren't enough. That's the mind's desperate attempt to solve what cannot be solved by logic. Emotional wounds don't heal through reasoning. They heal through awareness, through acceptance, and through deliberate presence. You don't escape the pain by ignoring it. You face it fully, honestly, without fear. A stoic man doesn't avoid the storm. He stands still in the center of it. He doesn't pretend he's unaffected. He acknowledges the sting, the sorrow, the heartbreak, but he doesn't let it shake his foundation. That's where your power is. Not in pretending you're fine, but in knowing that even though it hurts, you will carry on with dignity. You might miss her. You might see reminders of her everywhere. A song, a place, the way someone else laughs. These little echoes of a connection that used to mean something. That doesn't mean you're weak. That means you're alive, and you shouldn't try to numb yourself to that reality. What matters is what you do with that pain. Do you let it take you down? Do you chase after her in desperation, hoping that maybe if you just show her how hurt you are, she'll change her mind? Or do you use that pain as a mirror, a compass, a lesson? You channel it, not into bitterness, but into strength. You feel it, not to be broken by it, but to be rebuilt through it. There is immense quiet power in allowing yourself to grieve without allowing yourself to fall apart. She may have expected you to fight for her. She may have thought you'd crumble, plead, try to outshine the man she left for. But you didn't. You stood tall. You sat with the discomfort. You walked forward anyway. That kind of poise, that kind of restraint, it leaves a lasting impression, not just on her, but on you, because it tells the world and yourself that you are not defined by who stays or who leaves. You're defined by how you carry yourself when the unexpected hits. You are defined by the way you show up when things don't go according to plan. That is the real test of strength. Attachment is not love. It masquerades as love. It feels urgent, like you can't breathe without the other person, like life won't make sense if they walk away. But that's not connection, it's dependency, and when she chooses someone else, it's not the love that hurts the most, it's the attachment. It's the mental wiring you created around the fantasy of forever. That attachment is what makes the silence feel deafening, the distance feel unbearable. But the good news is, attachment can be rewired. The more you return to yourself, the more you begin to realize that peace doesn't come from being with her. It comes from being with yourself and not needing her presence to validate your own. This is where men often confuse pain with weakness. They believe that if they're not instantly okay, if the breakup stings for weeks or months, that they've failed some internal test of manhood. But that's not true. Pain is part of the process. It's not something to escape. It's something to embrace as a necessary threshold into a deeper version of yourself. You begin to understand the weight of your own presence. You start to see how much of your identity was tied to her attention. And little by little you reclaim it, not by forgetting her, not by pretending she meant nothing, but by realizing that your self-worth doesn't vanish just because she chose someone else. You rise slowly but surely, not by denying your emotions, but by honoring them without letting them drive you. You walk into the storm without fear, without pretending. You become the mountain the storm passes over. Solid, present, grounded, that kind of strength, internal, invisible, unwavering, is what separates the man who heals from the man who stays stuck. Not because he didn't feel the pain, but because he used the pain. He made peace with the ache, and through that became unshakable. There's a deep ache that sets in when you've shown up fully for someone, when you've given them loyalty, presence, consistency, and patience, and they still choose someone else. It doesn't just sting, it shakes your very sense of self if you're not rooted in your worth. That moment, the one where she walks away or turns toward another man, can feel like it erases everything you brought to the table. You question your value, your decisions, your love. You ask yourself if you should have done more, tried harder, loved differently. But here's a hard truth wrapped in freedom. Your worth is not proven by who stays. Your worth is revealed by how you carry yourself when they leave. And not everyone who leaves you is going to realize what they walked away from. And they don't have to. Their recognition is not your requirement. What you gave was real. Your presence, your patience, your emotional investment, that was all authentic. but not everyone has the depth or the readiness to receive something authentic. Some people are looking for the surface. They're drawn to what glitters, what's loud, what's momentarily exciting, and in chasing that spark, they overlook the steady flame of someone who truly shows up. That's not your flaw, that's their limitation. You didn't lose value when she left, you revealed hers. Or more accurately, you revealed her inability to see yours. And it's not your job to explain it to her, to try and convince her of what she missed. That urge to prove yourself, to show her how wrong she was, to hope she regrets it, that's a trap. Because even if she does regret it, your growth should never hinge on her realization. It should come from within you, from your decision to stop seeking external confirmation and start honoring your internal truth. You don't need her to look back to validate what you offered. The real proof of your value isn't in her return, it's in your response. When she left, how did you stand? When she didn't see your worth, did you crumble or did you rise? That's the real test. The man who doesn't chase, who doesn't beg, who doesn't try to outperform the next guy just to win her attention back. He's the one who wins in the long run. Not because he played it cool, not because he tried to appear unfazed, but because he was grounded in something deeper, self-respect. There's a rare kind of energy that comes from a man who doesn't need to be loud to be valuable. A man who's not jumping on social media to post subliminal messages, not trying to make her see. By flaunting his success, he just lives, he focuses, he grows, he gets sharper, he becomes more of who he already was. That type of man doesn't need to remind anyone of what they lost, because his life, his peace, and his presence do the talking. The irony is that when a man steps into that quiet power, the very person who walked away often does look back. Not because he forced them to, but because absence, true absence, makes the loudest statement. Picture that months later, you're focused on your goals, centered, emotionally composed, not looking over your shoulder. You're not waiting for her to regret. You're not pausing your life in the hope that she finally gets it. You're simply building quietly, and then someone new enters your life. She sees you for who you are. She values your calm, your strength, your depth, not because you're performing for her, but because that's naturally who you've become. She's not confused. She's not comparing. She's ready. And in her eyes, you're not just another option. You're the standard. That's the beauty of growth. You attract someone who doesn't need to be convinced, who doesn't overlook you for the next thrill, because you stopped chasing and started becoming. The real twist in the story is that by the time the one who left might finally see your value, you've already evolved past needing them to. That's not arrogance. That's healing. That's maturity. That's what happens when you stop living to be chosen and start living in full alignment with your own self-worth. You stop seeking permission to feel enough. You stop revisiting what's already been decided. You stop tying your value to someone else's clarity. Instead, you become the man who never needed to be seen to know he was already standing in his power. And whether she comes back or never looks again, it doesn't change the truth. You were always valuable. She just wasn't the one meant to recognize it. Her absence may feel like a hollow space at first, an emptiness you didn't ask for and weren't ready to face. One day you're building a life around her presence, anchoring your days in the rhythm of that connection, and the next, you're left standing in silence. It's jarring. That absence isn't just about missing a person. It's about being left with all the energy, intention, and emotional investment you no longer know where to put. It can feel like a void, like everything you were pouring into her has nowhere to go now. But that very space she left behind, painful as it may be, is the soil in which your next evolution can grow if you allow it. Her exit didn't take your value with her. What left was your illusion, the version of the relationship you wanted to believe in, the fantasy you held onto longer than you should have. And now, in the space she vacated, you're being given a rare opportunity to rebuild. This rebuilding doesn't begin with distraction or replacement. It doesn't come from rushing into something new or numbing yourself with attention, validation, or temporary pleasure. No, it begins in solitude. In that first moment when you sit with yourself, stripped of the noise, with nothing but your thoughts, your breath, and your pain, it's raw, it's uncomfortable, but it's honest. That's the birthplace of clarity. And clarity only arises when you're no longer emotionally crowded. Think about how much of your energy was going toward maintaining that relationship, compromising your routines, softening your standards, shrinking your vision just to make her feel comfortable. You may not have even noticed it while it was happening. That's the subtle nature of overinvesting. It doesn't feel like self-abandonment until it's over and you realize how far you drifted from who you were before her. Now is your time to return, to reconnect with the man you were before you made her the priority. What were the things you loved doing that started to fade into the background? The disciplines you neglected? The passions you put on pause? Maybe you stopped training like you used to. Maybe you let go of your creative pursuits. Maybe your vision got blurred because you began seeing your future only through her. This is your moment to take all that energy that was flowing outward toward her and redirect it inward, not out of bitterness, not as revenge, but as a deliberate act of self-respect. You get to re-enter your own life with purpose. Revisit your ambition. Reignite the standards you softened. Restore the boundaries you blurred. And here's the power of that kind of return. It grounds you in something unshakable. Because once you've rebuilt your life on your terms, not based on her presence, but based on your own principles, no one can take that from you again. Her absence didn't just create a void, it created an opening. A clean slate, a space to become. You begin to see that you don't need anyone to fill that space in order to feel complete. It was never her job to complete you. That belief was part of the illusion. Completion doesn't come from another person. It comes from alignment with your own values, your own direction, your own truth. And ironically, it's in this space, after she's gone, that your most powerful growth happens. Not because of her, but because of what you're now free to remember, reclaim, and rebuild. You begin waking up earlier, you train harder, you read more, you reconnect with friends who reflect your values. You spend time alone, not in isolation, but in recalibration. You stop looking for someone to understand you, and you begin understanding yourself more deeply than ever before. The space she left, once filled with longing, becomes filled with movement, discipline, focus. It's not about being cold or indifferent. It's about being conscious. You're not pretending it didn't hurt. You're just choosing not to let the pain lead your decisions anymore. That's real strength. That's what separates the man who repeats old patterns from the man who evolves. And here's another truth that reveals itself in this process. The longer you sit with your solitude and allow it to shape you, the more you realize that peace is far more valuable than the comfort of a connection that requires you to betray yourself. That silence, once suffocating, becomes sacred. You no longer rush to fill it. You let it teach you. You let it break what needed breaking and reveal what needed rebuilding. Her absence may have brought you to your knees, but what rises in its place is a man who no longer waits to be chosen. He becomes. He doesn't chase after what's gone. He aligns with what he's becoming. And in that space, in that stillness, in that raw and often lonely place of starting over, something rare is born. A man who's no longer afraid to be alone because he's finally home within himself. So if she chose someone else, let her. Not with resentment, not with desperation, but with quiet strength and unwavering clarity. Her departure is not your ending, it's your rebirth. This is the chapter where you stop chasing what isn't aligned and start becoming the man who never begs to be seen, because he sees himself clearly. And from that stillness, from that centered power, you rise, not to prove anything to her, but to honor everything within you. Let her go and watch what finds you when you finally choose yourself.